Hey everybody, Alex with SCADA here. In this video, we're going to extend the Launchpad KPI project with a new widget component that we can put on our dashboard. We'll include mapping to some quote-unquote real-world tags with our simulated compressor data, and then we'll go through how to set this up so that you can access it in the client, and then we'll configure it in a dashboard in a prospective session. So first we're going to go up to our views. We'll expand Exchange, Launchpad, KPI, and since all of our other components for dashboard widgets exist under the components folder, we will add a new view here. We'll call this compressor card, and we'll make it a flex container. And we'll hit create view, and that will open it up in our editing pane here. So the first thing that we'll want to do, we'll want to throw a title onto this to show what we are looking at, and then we'll add some graphical displays and numeric displays and things to show some tag data. So let's first look at our root container and see we're in the column direction for our flex container, meaning everything's going to stack vertically on top of one another. So we can add a label, just drag that into our root container here. And we can just add a style class. Let's see. We'll make it a KPI text label that will apply those various style classes here from the Exchange Launchpad KPI text label style class. Then next, let's add, so let's look at our simulated data here, refrigeration, compressor 1. So let's add, we'll add a motor graphic so we can display if the motor's running, and then we'll add a handful of data points below that. So to add a motor graphic, we'll go view, reset panels to get our perspective components back. And we'll just minimize these and we'll go down to the bottom to symbols. And let's grab a motor icon and we'll drag that over to our flex container. That will populate here below the label, and that will give us a motor component. And then let's say we want to look at 4 different values, maybe motor amps, percent loaded, power demand, and inlet pressure. So let's say we want to put those in a grid of 4 boxes over here. So for that, we can add another flex container, and we'll want that to be a row so that we can have a left column and a right column. So we'll drag a row flex container over. Then we can deep select this, and we will add 2 column flex containers within that, one for our left column and one for our right column. So that will give us all of the information we're going to display here on the card in terms of the structure. So now that we have our flex container set up, we can deep select the one on the left here, and we will use an existing component. We'll drag a value unit label over to that. And since we want to show 2 of those devices or 2 of those tags, we'll do 2 of those, and then we'll deep select the right one, and we will do the same thing. Now let's go through our components now that everything's added, and we'll rename things, and then we'll start working on the layout and data mapping. So let's call this label title. select our motor, call it motor compressor. Call our flex container flex data. And we'll call this flex data left. And flex data right. Then within these, we will go call this motor amps. Call this one motor percent loaded. And then I think we said power demand and inlet pressure. Okay, so now this all makes sense in terms of what we're looking at. It wasn't consistent there. Let's call these val, val, and val. And you can name those whatever you want, just something that makes sense if you're looking at this screen a year from now. You don't have to necessarily dig into bindings and things to see which component goes to which. So right now, let's go to our left and right flex data containers, because right now those are just here on the left and right, and we have a bunch of empty space over here. To fix that, we can just change grow to 1 on both of those, and those will automatically grow to fill the remaining space. In this case, they'll just both take up 50% of the width of the parent flex container, the flex data container here. So now if we look at one of the existing components, we will see that we have a path up here, and then we have parameters mapped to that. So we want to be able to pass parameters from the overall view down into these components to be able to display data to those. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go up to our view, and we want to add a view parameter. We're just going to add a value, because what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in a tag path to our compressor folder, and then we can from there define everything into specific tags for the compressor data that we're looking at. So we'll just call this tag path, and we can just copy in our path here as a default value for now, and then we can start to build things up and see data start flowing. So since these are already predefined components, let's take our path parameter on these and let's build up a structure for that binding so that it displays a relevant value. Okay, so we want to map our tag path to our motor amps tag. So let's copy that. We'll go to our motor amps widget here, and we're expecting to see a tag path parameter, so we can add a binding to that property. We want to build up a string, so we'll make it an expression, and we will paste our overall tag path to the tag that we want to look at here. And to make this dynamic, we'll clear out everything up to our compressor1 folder, which is what we currently have set up in our view parameter. And we will add that to /motor_amps. Go view params tag path. We'll hit OK. And we'll see that that comes up with our overall tag path to motor amps. When we hit OK here, we see motor amps populate there. So we will do the same thing with %loaded. We'll copy that path. go to our percent loaded widget, go to our path property, clear out everything we don't need, and add that to params tag path. Then we will go to our power demand widget, copy that tag path, edit the path binding expression, now we could also, if we wanted to, we can do a copy binding, come here, right click on path and do paste binding, and then we can come up here, and this is our inlet pressure. So we can grab pressure inlet oil as our tag name there. We can just replace power demand with inlet oil. Hit OK, and now we have data populating in all of those. Now if we hover over our value unit label, we see you have a value, TBD in the middle, and then some text at the bottom. And we see that we just have the tag name here in each of these. So now we could go into our tags and we can update their metadata to give us information that we can use to populate in this screen. So let's do that now. So let's first see what we're looking for. So let's open our value unit label widget. We can click our value display here. We know that's coming across, but we can just look at that's bringing across a value property from the tag. We can look at our units. That is pulling across a custom property from units, and label is pulling across the label property. So let's go to our view, and we see here custom parameters. Value, we know that's working because that's already coming across. That just brings an indirect binding from the overall tag path that we're passing in, and that's working fine. Now our units comes from the engineering unit property on the tag. So we'll need to update that for each of those tags. And our label, I believe this comes from the documentation property. So now let's open our compressor card. Then let's open our motor amps tag. So we want to set up our documentation to say, let's click the edit here, compressor 1 amps, we'll hit OK there, and we'll open that back up, and we will go to engineering units, and we'll just put A for amps, hit tab to accept that, and hit OK. So now we have compressor 1 amps with a unit of amps. Let's go to percent loaded. Click edit here. Compressor 1 percent loaded. Oops. And engineering units to percent. Hit OK. Power demand. Let's see what units power demand would be. Let's just say kilowatts, even though the value is not going to necessarily make any sense. We'll put in kilowatts. And pressure inlet oil. Let's just say PSI, and this is, because I clicked and dragged accidentally, we will close that out and reopen. And now we see that we have relevant information here coming directly from the tags. So that would be a note when you're creating tags, if you're using widgets like these and you are tying to things like documentation and tag paths, you may want to either create that when you're generating the tags, or like, since we know none of these tags have any documentation, we could write a script that goes through and updates all of those across the entire project to give us valid information on what we're looking at there. So now that we have the data down here at the bottom working, let's select our compressor motor. Now let's see, we haven't looked at one of these yet. This is a symbol. So this is a predefined symbol that we have in perspective that gives us a graphical view of types of equipment. We have different appearance settings. Auto gives us this view. PNID gives us something we might see on a PNID drawing. Mimic gives us a more complicated interface, and then simple is the same as auto, at least for the motor. We can also have animation. We can have default state. We can have a running state, a stopped state, and a faulted state. That gives us predefined options here. And we can have it change orientation if we want the motor to be oriented in a different way to match what's out in the field. We'll just put right. You can also change the feet. Say maybe it's mounted to the ceiling, or it's mounted on a wall. And then you can say with left orientation and top, we can have a sideways motor. So we'll leave this at right and bottom. And then we can have label. Maybe we don't care about that because we have the title up at the top, so we want to get rid of showing motor. We'll change that to hidden, and then our value is our data that we're looking at from our tags. So given the options that we have here, we don't have a speed tag per se, but we can just use motor amps for the sake of this example. So here, since we want to display a value instead of a path like we did on the widgets, we can do an indirect binding. And we can copy this tag path. We can paste that here. And as we've discussed in other videos, we can replace what we want in the tag path to be dynamic with curly braces wrapped either around a number or a string. In this case, we'll put in tag path so it makes sense to what we're looking at. And we will pull our params tag path over. We'll hit OK and enter. That brings across a value. Let's say that we want to give it units, so we can add a transform. This will give us our value, and we see that that has a lot of decimal places. So as we've done before, let's round that to 2 decimal places and add amps at the end of it. So that will give us a value with some units at the end of it up here, and that will match our amps down here. We could also create a speed tag if we wanted to show speed. That would be more common for a motor, but in this case we'll just leave it as is. And also for the motor graphic, we can do a binding on the state property. We'll bind this as an indirect tag to refrigeration, compressor 1, motor amps. We will clear out the part that is covered by our tag path parameter. Give that a property. Here, tag path. And we can do that since we're looking at a value, not a tag path like we mapped to the widgets. And then we'll want to map this to a given range, so we can do a map transform. We want this to be numeric range. We'll set our fallback to faulted. Then we will add stopped and running. And these map the options within the state property. So we will give a min, I don't know what the minimum value is, so we'll just do 999 up to 50. And let's say 50 to 999. Now this will cover pretty much any value I would expect to see. We can also do this as a parentheses with no value, and do this as a close parentheses with no value. And that will give us a value below 50 and about value above 50. We'll do parentheses on both of those. And our current value is 98. That's giving us stopped. I didn't hit enter, so I want to go. There we go. You have to hit enter after you enter your mapping values. So now if we have anything less than 50, we'll show stopped. Anything 50 or above will show running. And if we're somehow not in that range, we'll show faulted. So now we'll show that that's running. We see the default animation is on. And we will leave that as is. Now we can finally go up to our title here, and we can update our text. Okay, so now we'll go up to our label, to our text property, and we will add a binding to that. We'll just do an expression binding, and we'll first grab our tag path parameter. And okay, so we will pull in our tag path parameter, and this gives us this format. So what we can do here is we can use a split function to split on the slashes, and we can pull out just compressor 1 at the end here. So that will be, we have default simulated data would go in slot 0 of the array, refrigeration would go into 1, and compressor would go into 2. So we can come to the beginning, go to our function selector, strings, split, pass in the string, pass in what we want to split to, and grab the second option. And there it Does that need to be 20? Okay, so that'll break it up into an array. So we pull in the second cell of that in the first value, and we see compressor 1. And we'll just leave it at that for the moment. If we wanted to throw a space in there, we could get a little clever with some substrings and add a space into that. But we'll just leave that as compressor 1. So now everything here is dynamic. So if we were to go back up to our view and change this to compressor 2, we'll see that everything changes to match compressor 2's data instead of compressor 1. So we'll see motor amps is 99.4, and that matches. So now we effectively have a template that we can also use as a widget. And this is still a little large, so let's scale this down. That's probably reasonable. That's smushed compressor 1 inlet pressure. Let's make that bigger and a little smaller. And there is our compressor card. So we'll hit save there. And next we will go dig into how we get this to populate as a widget on our dashboard so that we can configure it on an actual dashboard in the client. Now, if we were going to create a lot of widgets, we could write some scripting to handle the next part. But since we're only adding one to the system, we'll kind of demonstrate how these are stored in the database and made available to you in the system, and then how that populates into the client. So now that we have our compressor card widget set up, we want to go to Tools, Database Query Browser. Now we see we have these 3 tables here, widgets, widget parameters, and parameter types. We can double click one of those and get a select all from that table. We'll hit execute. These are currently all of the widget types that exist. So if we go into the client and pull up the dashboard editor, we would see these pull up in the list. Let's dock this and close out properties. So we want to first add an item to this table so that we have access to that. What we need is an ID, a name, and a path. So let's copy the path to our compressor card widget. And we will do insert into ex_lp_widgets. We want to do ID, name, path, values 11, compressor, and we'll paste our path here. We can hit execute. Rows affected 1, so we see that 1 row has been added. Let's double click our table again, and we'll see that we now have a compressor widget that shows up. Then we also need to add in the parameters for that. So if we first go to parameter types, we'll see what we already have. Real-time tag is 1 of an ID, tag history is 2, string is 3, 4 is drop down. We'll do a real-time tag because that will map to tag path in the widget editor. So then we also go to widget parameters, double click that, and we'll see we have a widget ID here, and then a parameter name, what the parameter is called, a parameter type ID, a default value, and a configuration. So here we can go to insert into this table. We want to do ID, widget ID, parameter name, parameter type ID, values, we want 17, 11 was our widget ID that we added. We want this to be tag path for the actual parameter name. And then our parameter type ID we want to be 1. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're good there. Let's execute that. Now we can verify that that has been added to the table down here at the bottom. So now we can go into our dashboard in the client. Just reset from 0 here. We can go to our dashboard. We have dashboard 1 selected. Let's edit the current dashboard. And let's clear out our notepad widget so we can X that out. Then we can click in the area that's left behind and click plus. Now we see compressor pop up. So we can add that. And that will currently show up with null values because we don't have a tag path currently selected. So let's go to edit that. Now we bring up the widget configuration window where we can search for our tag path, simulated data, refrigeration, compressor 1. Let's select that and save. And now everything is mapped to our compressor 1 tags. And if we wanted to also show compressor 2, we can remove this widget here. We can go through compressor. We can make this bigger. And now we can select our compressor 2 folder. You have to click on the text, not the arrow, just FYI. Compressor 2, select, save. So now we're showing both of our compressor cards here on the screen. You'll see on compressor 2 down below, we didn't configure the metadata on the tags yet, so we don't see the units and the more robust display here from the documentation tag. So now we can hit save on our dashboard, and those are pulled across to our dashboard. So the main trick here after creating your widget views is that you need to add them into the database so that they show up here under the, just close this for the moment, so that they show up here under the widget picker tool. And then you have to map your parameters so you can edit those when you click edit on the widget itself. But it's a fairly straightforward process. And I believe some of that's covered in the documentation for the KPI project. If not, you can dig into the dashboard documentation for the dashboard component in perspective as well at docs.inductiveautomation.com. So that gives you a good run through everything in the KPI project and how to create your own widgets and map widget values into tags that are not necessarily part of this project to begin with. And we'll cancel out of this, and that will keep the changes that we made. Thank you for watching.